webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
This meeting of the Board of Adjustment is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Vaughn Fry,
Here.
David Miller,
Here.
Judy Vogel,
Here.
Rob Anders, Rob Anders, Rob Anders, can you please unmute yourself? Betty Goodwine,
Here.
Mr. Anders, if you've muted yourself, can you please unmute yourself?
Madam Clerk, we do show him on the line, but he's just not able to answer right now. Okay, thank you. So we have all board members are present, 4 by voice affirmation, 1 shows on the line. Okay, thank you. It's good to virtually be connected with everybody today. Thank you to our board for your service and for your attendance today. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the Board of Adjustment meeting held on August 25th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Remember to state your name and the motion.
Judy
David Miller,
Vogel.
motion to approve.
Judy Vogel, I second.
So was that Mr. Miller or Mr. Anders that did the motion?
Miller.
Miller, thank you.
Miller.
And Vogel. for the second. Is there any discussion or corrections? No discussion. We'll vote by roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yvonne Fry,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Judy Vogel,
Aye.
Robert Anders, Betty Goodwine,
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes of the August 25th, 2020 are approved with a vote of 4-0. The next order of business is public comments. Public comments for this meeting are accepted by electronic submission or mailed to the clerk, and any public comments received are disseminated to the Board of Adjustment electronically prior to the start of the meeting for review and inclusion into the meeting's official record. The next order of business is the swearing in of staff and speakers. Madam Clerk?
do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. The next order of business is new business for a quasi-judicial hearing, case BLA 2020-05. City staff, would you please state your name and address and that you've been sworn in, and then proceed with the case.
Good afternoon, board members. Robin Baker, Senior Planner with the Planning and Zoning Department, and I've been sworn in.
Thank you.
The request before you today is BLA-2020-05, a variance request for Dr. Larry Sykes. The site is located near 1308 East Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and has an R1 zoning designation, which is one of our single-family zoning districts. And the site is located within the Laura Street Restoration Overlay District and is within the R12 Future Land Use category. Next slide, please. Oh, just kidding. The applicant is requesting a variance to section 102-848A, which deals with the determination of the allowance for small lots within the Laura Street Restoration Overlay District. The Laura Street Restoration District has an allowance for small lots of record that were established prior to January 1st, 2000, which is approximately 5 years prior to the overlay district being adopted. Lots of record that meet this requirement are allowed to develop small lots with reduced widths and setbacks. And the graphics before you show an aerial and parcel overlay from 2018, which shows the lot in its original form prior to splitting, which shows one large lot. The graphic on the right is from 2020 imagery and parcel lines and shows how the lot has been split into 3 lots, one of which is 45 feet wide, which is the parcel in question, and the other 2 are approximately 67.5 feet wide and 90 feet deep. In reviewing the application, staff looked at 4 main items. 1, the most important item, did the applicant provide a hardship justification for the request? 2, would the variance request contribute to the goals of the Laura Street Restoration District? 3, would the variance request contribute to the pattern of development along South Forest Street? And finally, if approved, would the request set a precedent in the Laura Street area? I'll address each of these individually. Staff feels as though the applicant did not provide sufficient evidence to prove a hardship. The applicant speaks mainly to the goals of the Laura Street Restoration District being to develop open space, when in fact the goals set forth for this area were not just simply to develop open space, and I'll discuss that a little further in a moment. More specifically, criteria 2 asks why special circumstances are not the result of actions of the applicant. In December of 2019, prior to splitting the property, the applicant was advised by staff that if the lot was split, all lots would have to be 60 feet wide. By splitting the lots to have one lot at only 45 foot wide, the applicant has created a self-imposed hardship. The next bit of research was to dive into the goals of the Laura Street Overlay District and discover why this lot of record date was created in the first place. In 2004, a study was conducted for the city to establish a plan for the restoration of the Laura Street area. A big portion of the restoration plan was to invite different income levels into this portion of the city. To do that, they suggested that the viable small lots be retained to provide affordable housing for those that needed it, and any vacant lots or lots with non-retainable structures be combined through lot assemblage to create larger lots in order to invite different income levels. So staff feels that creating smaller lots now would be a step backward to this proposed plan. Staff also looked at the development pattern along South Forest Street. We measured the size of the lots that face South Forest Street and discovered that they were all 60 feet and larger. You'll see on the graphic on the left that we provided in the staff report. If you were to take a stroll down South Forest Street from Church down to East Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, you'll see that all of the lot faces that face South Forest are all at least 60 feet wide and above. We also took a look at the original plat that was recorded for this area that was recorded in 1909. And you'll see on that plat that all of these lots have been this size since the beginning. So you'll see that, again, on that same block, all of the faces of the lots that face South Forest are all 60 feet and above, except for the one lot that's been created, the 45 feet. And finally, staff asked the question, would approval of this request set a precedent? And the answer is yes, it absolutely would. There are many lots within this area that currently meet the zoning code that could potentially be split in the same manner to provide smaller lots. And again, staff feels that this goes against the current goals of this restoration district. It is staff's opinion that the applicant did not submit substantial evidence for the 6 review criteria in support of a variance from section 102-848A regarding small lot designation within the Lawrence Street Restoration Overlay District. Staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment deny the variance request to section 102-848A for a varied lot of record date. I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Does the board have any questions for Ms. Baker before the applicant presents?
Judy Vogel, I'd like to see that plat put back up and address Church Street.
Give us 1 second on that.
Okay.
Okay, so I see Church Street, they have 45-foot lots there. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. If you could see the plat as a whole, you'd see that the majority of the lots located in this area that, you know, were made allowance for are generally located in that north-south direction like that along Church Street. And then I think a little further to the south. I wish I had the whole thing to put up here, although it's kind of hard to read on this small screen. But yes, all of the lots along Church Street that face Church Street are 45 feet wide. What I was speaking to is that the side of the lot is what fronts on Forest Street, and it's 110 feet right there in that area. So if you were walking along Forest Street, you're going to see the long side of that property.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make certain I was looking at the right portion there. And since it's the whole neighborhood we're addressing, I wanted to make certain I was looking at the whole neighborhood. Because I see some that are platted at 55 foot, 45 foot. And so I wanted to see the whole neighborhood since we're addressing the whole neighborhood. And then my other question is, since you're trying to, I guess, introduce different income levels, and this has been since 2000, do we have anything stating that this change for this neighborhood has introduced different income levels?
Well, I do know that as part of that plan, the city has gone in and purchased a lot of the lots in this area. And as part of that process, through lot assemblage, either the lots were not owned by the same person, and so they would be allowed to fall under that small lot designation, or the lots were combined to create something that met the standards, and so they were developed that way. So, you know, in this particular instance, as far as the Lawrence Street Overlay restoration was concerned, that was the whole concept, was yes, there are a lot of lots in this area that are 45 to 60 feet wide. And so it made allowance for those lots that existed that should remain. So the way that it's stated in the report, it basically says that any of the vacant lots or the lots that had dilapidated structures on them, those lots should be combined and sold as larger lots. Anything that was existing prior to that date that was established, those 45-foot wide lots could remain, and then they would have different development standards. And so that kind of established that what was assumed at that time as lower income. That's not always the case. The houses these days on 45-foot wide lots can be more than that, but it was a way to not gentrify this neighborhood by implementing this restoration. That's what happens a lot of times when you try to restore a neighborhood, is that people think if you infuse money, then it gets better, but then you run the people out that lived there to begin with. So that effective date, that lot of record effective date, was established to preserve those in the neighborhood that had those smaller lots at the time that this was, approved, so that they could remain and not, be ran out of this neighborhood, basically.
I understand. I understand completely. I just wanted that to be brought up since it was mentioned. I just wanted it to be explained on record.
Ms. Vogel, can I ask, on addition to your question, just for further clarification, my question is, and this is Yvonne Fry.
Yes.
So when this overlay happened, we grandfathered in 45-foot lots with existing structures and then wanted everything else to be bigger. But the point of that was to make sure it was a mixed variety of different types of housing available on the scale. But we are not able to, it's precluded from the 45-foot lots right now for new.
Correct. People
Which
cannot,
it is confusing to me. It doesn't seem to make sense.
anytime you're talking about restoration, okay, again, you deal with a lot of ideals that are probably not the ideals of today. Okay, it's the thought process that lower income don't take care of the properties, and so you need people of higher income to enter these areas. Now, that's not always the case, and it's not the proper way to think about things, but to invite a different level of income into these neighborhoods and give other options was the ultimate goal of the restoration. Again, there are a ton of empty 40 to 60 foot wide lots in this area already. So, and unfortunately, I don't have those numbers for you exactly how many are vacant and available today, but there are some vacant lots in the area. So, is there a need to create more smaller lots? I personally have to speak to what the code says and why it was created. And at this point, that date was put in place so that it was everything existing prior to the adoption of the overlay. So.
Okay. And so you're saying that those other lots are also unbuildable? If 45, if they're similar to this one at 45 foot, they're also unbuildable, which keeps that community from being able, that part of the community from being able to progress with new development and new housing options.
No, if they were a 45 foot wide lot established prior to January 1st, 2000, then they get different development standards. They get reduced lot width, reduced lot square footage, and they get reduced setbacks to accommodate smaller structures on smaller lots.
And that was just determined by a date and time?
Correct.
Okay. That's challenging. Okay.
Their excuse me, this is Judy Vogel again. They're grandfathered in is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Did any other of our board members have questions for Ms. Baker, staff? No? This is a public hearing. In the notice for this hearing, the public was advised to contact the clerk no later than 3 p.m. on September 21st prior to this public hearing, should anyone wish to speak. Madam Clerk, did anyone contact your office to speak at this public hearing? No.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Larry Sykes, the applicant, available. No other persons have requested to be heard for this public hearing.
Mr. Sykes, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for joining us today. Would you like to address the board? If so, please state your name, address, and whether you've been sworn in.
Larry Sykes, 617 Spruce Street, Plant City, Florida, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Madam Chairman Fryer and the board, thank you for allowing me to come before you, asking this committee to grant the variance before you today. I was able to purchase my grandparents' property from my aunt last year. The current home on the property had been vacant for the past 6 years, and the actual property that we're speaking about today has been vacant for over 40 years. After purchasing the land, my wife and I saw that this was an opportunity for us to assist our family members in becoming homeowners. We proceeded by getting the alley vacated, which gave the property over 18,000 square feet, giving 3 lots of at least 6,000 square feet total. We were also told by staff that we needed to have at least that amount of land and that the minimum of 60 square feet needed to be there. This is where the third lot fell short. Living in this community all my life, I saw other homes being built that were smaller than this one, so I thought we would try to build as well. The city staff then shared with us that the Laura Street project did allow for small lots to be built. However, the lots needed to have been on record prior to January 2000. So here we are today asking you to grant our request. In the packet that I shared with the clerk, I shared 2 new homes that we could build if we were granted. And page 3 and 4 of that package shows where I received blueprints completed for her contract to have one of those homes built on parcel 1, which meets the criteria already. By allowing this waiver, you would be enhancing this community with 2 new homes and helping young people become homeowners. I will end by saying I also spoke with some of the current owners in the community. They were not against this endeavor. We are at the mercy of this committee and asking that the variance be approved. Thank you for your time in considering this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Sykes at this time?
The third lot that's in question, that's only 45 foot wide with the vacancy, the 5 foot, I think, alleyway that was vacated, that still does not give him 6,000 square feet, does it?
Are you asking me, ma'am?
I'm addressing the city. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Ms. Baker can answer that.
Okay, actually, due to the length, the depth of the property, it actually is 6,045 square feet is what that lot is, because it's so long. They're equal in square footage, the 3 lots are, so they're each 6,045 square feet, just the width is in question.
Okay, I guess I calculated that wrong then. Okay, that was one of my questions.
That was a great point to clarify, and it is interesting that they are all equal in square footage. So, did anyone have any other questions for Mr. Sykes at this time?
Madam Chair, this is Rob Anders. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, I'm sorry, my laptop went bad, so I'm logged on with my telephone right now.
We're glad you made it.
Okay, I guess I had a question more for staff. The diagram that was done by the surveyor didn't show any distance between the existing building and the I guess it's east side parcel. Does that meet minimum setbacks?
I mean, technically, they would be required to meet minimum setbacks without a variance. It's the way that part of the code is worded is it's notwithstanding the other zoning categories. If it's determined today that, his variance is approved, then he would have reduced setbacks on the sides. Generally a 45, foot wide lot, you think 10 on each side, you could build a 25 foot wide house.
No, I'm sorry, I'm speaking about the existing building. There's no side yard setback shown on that drawing between that existing building and the side yard distance?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information, and I don't have a way to measure it here, unless I can turn this on and I can do it, but,
Okay,
but-
it's probably not important. It just wasn't clear, and I couldn't read any of the numbers there to even add the numbers myself.
I see.
Well, this is Judy Vogel. Is that at the proposed building? Because it says it's concrete block.
Yeah, it's an existing house.
The property line is the property line, though.
What do you mean?
Well, they've already created a parcel. I was just curious whether they met the existing building met the minimum side yard setback, because it just wasn't shown.
Well, I'll say this. The important thing to remember is that unless this goes through a plat process and creates these as lots of record, it's not necessarily something that we would look at on that existing house, because this is something that was done through the property appraiser, not through us. The only thing that we would look at are the two new lots as they came in for building permits. You know, we would look to see, do they meet the requirements or not? But again, technically the lots of record are two lots, 23 and 24, that are part of the plat. And they, you know, span the entire piece. They don't include that 45-foot wide piece, so.
Okay.
May I add something, Madam Chair?
Sure, please do.
My daughter, as I said earlier, is in contract now, and the contractor has already shared with her what the house has to be with the 30 back and the 20 front. She can build a house based on that, and the plan that I shared with you on page 3 and 4 meets that criteria for zoning R1.
Thank you for that clarification on the new proposed. That's helpful. Thank you. Does any of the other board members have any other questions for Mr. Sykes or for staff right now? I do have a quick question for staff. Mr. Sykes had mentioned that he had spoken to his neighbors, and I appreciate him taking that proactive step, but that you usually do that as well and reach out and notify folks. Have you heard anything? Obviously, I'm not sure if nobody else wanted to speak, but have we gotten any other feedback? Any
I've not
concerns?
received any phone calls.
Okay. Okay. One other question I had, real quick, on the timing of the overlay of when it happened, was that meant to go into perpetuity, or was there ever a time that it was supposed to be revisited? I don't know if those have a life cycle with the intention that was behind it, and is it time to potentially revisit that given where we are today?
I think at any time you could revisit the report that was done. As far as the code language, you know, the code language is the code language. There's no expiration on that, you know, setting that effective date of the lot of record. But sure, I mean, we can at any point go back and relook at the restoration district to see if, as times have changed, maybe there's other ways to treat restoration district to maybe, you know, maybe you install more architectural design standards, because there are some in place now for the small lots. They have to include at least 3 of the architectural standards from a list of items. So that way it ensures a better quality home that's built. They're required to have front porches, you know, that kind of thing. So you could always relook at that, revisit those items to see if you could put in certain standards, ensure that those 45-foot wide lots and lower were developed in a certain way. And just to see if the number of 40-foot wide lots that exist, maybe that could be expanded. We could always look at that.
Is it in the purview of this body to request that and to suggest it to whatever process that would take so that we could get some movement on that and some good feedback?
Sure, absolutely. We would, if that's a request that this board makes, we would definitely take that to the city manager and take the steps from there.
Okay. Because I personally would say that, you know, affordable housing, not only in our community, but across the county, the region, the state, the country, is certainly an issue. And housing options, I think, you know, is another way to phrase that.
Right.
because people want, that they want different options. And certainly that community, that part of our community, it feels like there's some barriers there.
Right.
And
I would also speak to the affordable housing portion of that and say that as the property sits today, let's say the variance request is not approved and we don't revisit the study. Today, because these lots are located within the R1 zoning district, they are accessory dwelling units. It's one of the few categories that we have that allow that. So with the lots the way they are today, they could build a detached garage that has an apartment attached to it. So the lots as is would be able to provide affordable housing.
okay. And
I-
go ahead, Mr. Sykes.
Go ahead. No, this is Rob Anders.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, you finish.
I didn't know go ahead with your question. I've got a few more, but I'll circle back around. I wanted your
Okay.
comment on that.
I had a question for staff, but speaking about affordable housing, are there any duplex structures in that area, or do you have any idea at this time if
I think
there are any duplex in that area?
I can't speak to existing duplexes, but I can say that duplexes are only allowed within the R2 zoning category. There are a few scattered lots throughout the Laura Street area that are zoned residential to, I say that all the time, R2. So there are some potentials for duplexes, but I could definitely give you those numbers if you'd like to see that.
Okay, well, I did notice that the future land use category is R12 for this area. And if that parcel was, I know they already divided it by the property appraiser into 3 parcels, but if it was 2 equal parcels, there'd be enough, at least my computations, there'd be half of that parcel would be enough land to do 2 dwelling units if it was zoned R2. Now, I know it's not zoned R2, but I just wondered if that was an option for them to apply for R2 on half of that property and then get a duplex. And then I know he's trying to get 3 families, I guess, on that land, and it was just a thought.
The property directly. Sorry, go ahead.
Chairman,
Yes, please.
just to answer the board member's question, east of that property is a duplex home right there on Forest Street. Right there on the corner of Maryland, MLK and Forest Street, there's a duplex right across the street from this property.
Yeah, the reason, this is Rob Anders again, the reason that I asked that was sometimes there's a concern about spot zoning, but I think an option would be for the property owner to request R2 zoning and then build a duplex, and then they'd have 3 dwelling units, which I think is his ultimate goal. I can't speak to whether staff would recommend approval of R2 or if the planning board would or if the city commission would, but that's just a thought I had on the issue of him wanting to serve 3 families and the affordable housing situation.
Based on the zoning directly to the east across the street, it is zoned R2 on that property. So it is definitely something that staff would consider rezoning on the property to residential too, because of the pattern of the area that exists across the street. But he would have to achieve the rezoning to be able to do the duplexes there.
Correct.
Expense would be incurred.
Yeah, time and expense.
Yes. Okay. We're gonna, as mentioned before, in order to speak at today's meeting, you must have registered with the clerk by 3 p.m. on September 21st. Since there's no other registrants, this hearing is closed. We've already obviously begun the discussion, but is there any other discussion from the board member or any further questions?
Madam Chairman, Betty Goodwine.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to make a statement. And my statement is, I heard at the beginning that lower homeowners don't take care of their property. Now, in most cases, that is not true. So could you put that in the record, please?
Yes, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Any other discussion on this matter?
Madam Chairman, this is Judy Vogel, and I would like to go ahead with a motion.
Okay,
And my motion is to approve this variance as requested.
thank you, Ms. Vogel. Is there a second?
Betty Goodwine, second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? No, seeing none. We will vote by roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yvonne Fry,
Aye.
David Miller,
Nay.
Judy Vogel,
Aye.
Rob Anders,
No.
Betty Goodwine.
Aye.
Thank you. This petition passes 3-2.
Oh,
And
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Could you strike that from the record? I will abstain.
that's Miss Goodwine.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Ms. Goodwine, this is Ken Buckman. You need to vote unless there's unless you have an interest in the proceeding or there's a issue with that maybe you've spoken to the petitioner or something, that there's a violation of some kind of ex parte communication.
No, I
What
just
would be
didn't
the basis?
understand the question. I didn't understand the question.
So this is a motion to approve the application for the variance for the
To
lot.
approve it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, let it stay. Let it stay.
So
I
you,
approve it for them to get what they're asking for.
can we go through this one more time? Because I had you down as a no, I believe. No?
But now, if this is what I didn't understand, I guess I didn't hear it well. This is to prove that they get what they're asking for, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Well, keep the first statement I made was yes.
So then we have a 3-2 approval for the applicant. Okay?
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr. Sykes, you are approved, and we wish
Thank
you
you.
the best with your family and this development of your homes. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming before us today. Okay.
Thank you so
on
much.
next- Excuse me, sir, go ahead.
I was just saying thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.
You too.
Our next order of business is other business and announcements. Is there any other business to come before the board today? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you to staff for their great work on this, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.